Okay, how about that one?
Oh, that was nice. That was, I think that would be a good introduction, or right near the beginning, to lead into what we're going to do. And now the question is, what are we going to do?
I think it would be nice to, for example, to start with how we both met and what we have in common and what we don't have in common. So our German background.
When I give a talk, I often like to talk about the terrible things that happened during the Holocaust. And I also talk about the good Germans. And then the final conclusion, I think, has to be that most Germans were not exceptionally good, not exceptionally bad, but were the ones who were the bystanders who allowed these things to happen. And maybe when you talk about modern Germany, what I've observed is that a lot of people would not be willing to be silent anymore. So,
of course, that would be a good mission to that, yeah, to remind people of speaking up, of having civil courage, and of course. We could also add that we both are, of course, we are very we have strong feelings about what happened, and our way of speaking up, as you are talking, you talk to schools and to children and to lots of people, and I do that in playing my clarinet. And,
very good, yes.
So you could turn it to me, and then I play another piece, and then we could start with the.
Okay. This is your language. You speak in your language with
right,
clarinet.
yeah.
I speak in my language. Of what I remember from that time.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an unusual meeting of our lecture on current German poetry. We have two guests today among us, Fritz Ottenheimer, you have it here, yeah, and Susanne Ortner, who represent two periods of German history. I will introduce them in a minute. Let me first of all say that our lecture on German poetry has emphasized throughout this semester that German literature of the post-war era relates directly or indirectly to what we might call Gedächtnis. Gedächtnis, memory, remembrance, is in the sense of relating our own thinking and writing to what has happened in Germany in the years of Nazi fascism. My generation, as well as Susanne's generation, she was my student in Augsburg, has grown up with a constant reminder, admonition, reflection to build our country's future, if we would have one, on ground zero of Germany's darkest and most barbaric age in history, the Holocaust. One of the survivors of this dark age is our guest, Fritz Ottenheimer. Our second guest, Susanne Ortner, is a clarinetist and high school teacher from Germany who specializes in Jewish Klezmer music as a representative of a new generation of Germans. She is committed to using words and music to promote cross-cultural understanding and to educate others about how young Germans today deal with the atrocities of war and the Holocaust committed by their grandparents' generation. Both Fritz and Susanne, if I may say so, will offer us a dialogue, past and present, New Germany, America, music and words, memory and future. Belonging to the generation in between, I'm touched and I'm grateful that a dialogue like this can happen in our age. Welcome to the University of Pittsburgh, Fritz und Susanne, and thank you for bringing your dialogue to this place. Thank you.
Susanne and I have a very unusual partnership. We're about as different as any two people can be. Susanne is a young woman. I'm an old man. Susanne lives in Augsburg, Germany. I live in Forest Hills, part of Pittsburgh, with my wife. Susanne is Christian. I'm Jewish. She's pretty tall. I'm relatively short. Those are the obvious differences. But in some important ways, we're very much alike. Both of us were born in Germany. Both of us feel very strongly about what Germany did to the Jewish people some 60 or 70 years ago. And both of us try to keep this, to do everything we can to keep this from happening again, anywhere, at any time, to any people. My efforts are in talking to groups like this group, telling them about the experiences, my own experiences of my family, and how that contributed to prejudice and hate. I do it by talking. Susanne expresses her feelings through music, Klezmer music, Jewish folk music. We start back in 1933. I was 8 years old at this time. It was the year when Hitler came to power in Germany. This incident took place on April 1st, 1933, just about 2 months after Hitler became the leader of Germany. My parents had a little store, menswear store, in the town of Constance in southern Germany. And my father was on his way to the store that morning, as he always did. But this morning, he heard sound trucks rolling through the town and yelling at the people, "Don't buy from Jewish stores, buy from German stores." He kept going. When he got to the store, he saw a stormtrooper, a uniformed Nazi, standing in front of the door of the store, obviously with the intent of keeping people from going into the store. My father turned around, went back home, came back a few minutes later. This time he walked past the stormtrooper, unlocked the door, and went into the store. He pulled all the shirts, socks, and ties and things out of the store window and spread out his World War I medals in the window. My father had been a German soldier in the German army during World War I, and these were medals that he had been awarded for bravery. He then went outside, stood next to the stormtrooper, rolled up the sleeve on his right arm, exposing his war injury, where a bullet had gone through his arm, shattered his elbow, and left his arm stiff for the rest of his life. He stood there, and soon people came up who knew him, who knew his war record, and they tried to explain calmly to the stormtrooper, this man, Mr. Ottenheimer, is indeed a good German. He has done his duty towards Germany. He risked his life during 4 years of World War I. He lost the use of his right arm fighting for Germany. Surely would not deny him the right to make an honest living. Well, the stormtrooper wasn't interested in that logic. He tried to ignore it, but more and more people came, and they were yelling louder and louder until finally the stormtrooper realized that he was not performing his intended purpose. So he walked away from the scene. And during the day, a number of people came into the store to explain to my parents that they did not approve of what the government was doing to the Jewish people. As I said, this was only 2 months after Hitler came to power. People were still not afraid to criticize their own government and to speak up against the government's policies. But this did not last long. Soon the propaganda of the Nazi government took over. Propaganda was extremely effective in influencing people's opinions and people's behavior. We had a neighbor, Herr Bürkle, who was a handyman, used to do some jobs for us. We were good friends with the family. I remember playing with their little daughter when we were both kindergarten age. One day, Mr. Bürkle showed up with a swastika party lapel, pin in his lapel, showing that he had joined the Nazi party. My father was shocked. "Would you mind telling me why you joined the party?" he asked Mr. Bürkle. "Not at all," Mr. Bürkle said. "I'll be glad to tell you. You know, we have a new leader now, and he's trying to straighten out the mess that our country is in. And we have to show him that we support him. Besides," he said, since I joined the party, I picked up a few new jobs. I see, my father said. Well, how do you feel about what the party is doing and what their attitude is towards the Jewish people? Mr. Berkeley was a little embarrassed now. Well, it's too bad, he said. It's too bad that the good have to suffer along with the bad. This is a statement we heard very often in those days. My father didn't let it go at that. He said, well, Mr. Berkeley, which ones are we? Are we the good Jews or the bad Jews? And Herr Berkeley laughed. He says, well, surely you're joking. You're wonderful people. We love you. You're our friends. All right, my father said, then you know quite a few of the Jewish people in Constance. Which ones are the bad Jews that along with whom we have to suffer? Now, Mr. Berkeley thought about it for a few seconds, and then he said, well, all the ones that I know are pretty decent people. Who are the bad Jews then? My father insisted. Now Mr. Berkeley was mad. You know damn well who they are. All you have to do is pick up a newspaper or listen to the radio, and you'll know who they are. And to offset any possible criticism that my father would have about the veracity of the propaganda in Germany, Herr Berkeley added another statement that was very common in those days. Where there's smoke, there's fire. We go forward to 1938. I was 13 years old by this time. It was the year of my bar mitzvah. On a November morning, I woke up. I was awakened by an explosion. What could explode in the peaceful neighborhood that we lived in the quiet little town of Constance? The only thing I could think of immediately was we had a gas station right across the street from where we lived. Gasoline can burn, can explode. So I ran to the window and looked out. Well, the gas station was perfectly normal, nothing different there. But I noticed there was a red flickering in the clouds above us. So I now ran to the back side of the house that we lived in, and where I normally would see the beautiful synagogue building, which was right around the corner from where we lived, I could now see only a big wall of fire. I rushed back into our apartment and told my parents what I'd seen, and they were shocked, of course. We stayed in the apartment and heard various rumors and reports. We heard that people were being rounded up. Jewish men were being arrested by the Gestapo, by the secret police. Well, here was my father. He was a Jewish man. They hadn't come for him. Were they going to not arrest him because of his war record because too many people knew what his background was. Surely they could not arrest a man like that. But then, right after lunch, there was a loud knock on our door, and 2 Gestapo agents showed up, and they placed my father under arrest. Now, when a man is arrested by the police, the first thing that usually happens is they read the charges to him. What is he being arrested for? What crime had he committed that he was now being placed under arrest? Well, my father hadn't committed any crime. There was no accusation of wrongdoing. There was no trial of any sort. The only crime that my father had committed was that he had been born into a Jewish family. On that day, we found out later, some 30,000 Jewish men all over Germany were arrested by Gestapo and were taken to one or another of the concentration camps. The only crime any of them had committed was to be Jewish. They took my father away. We didn't know where they were taking him. We didn't know what they would do to him, whether we would ever see him again. We didn't know whether they would come back and get the rest of us. We simply did not know what was happening or why, and we certainly did not know what was going to happen next. We lived as well as we could without my father. And about a month later, there was a soft knock on our door. And we were deliriously happy to see my father standing there, just barely standing there. He was a very sick man. He could hardly stand on his feet anymore. Had they kept him another week, I don't think he would have survived. He had been kept at Dachau concentration camp, and he was released again. All the 30,000, that is, all those who survived the conditions at the concentration camps, were released again anywhere from 1 to 6 months later. In other cities, there were other events during that night, which of course was Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, where gangs of Germans marched through the cities, broke into Jewish homes, into Jewish stores, broke and plundered everything. But that was not done in Constance. Constance was a rare exception. There was another incident that happened at approximately the same time, probably a little earlier. A man who had been kept prisoner at Dachau concentration camp was taken on a work detail outside of the camp. And somehow he was able to get away from his guards, was able to exchange his prison uniform for civilian clothing, was able to make his way down to Constance, my hometown, which he knew was on the border of Switzerland. Of course, his purpose in going to Constance was to try to find a way of escaping from Germany into Switzerland. Well, he didn't know the geography of Constance. He didn't know any people who lived in Constance. So he decided to check into a hotel and reconnoiter the area from there. That's where his luck ran out. When he checked in with the hotel clerk asked him for his ID, his identification card, which was routine, standard procedure at that time. Well, he didn't have an ID card, and he came up with some kind of an explanation, some kind of a story of why he didn't have the ID card. The hotel clerk took them up to a room, showed them the room, left them there, went back down to the desk, immediately called the criminal police department of Constance. And he said, "We have a man who just checked in here in the hotel, Looks very suspicious. I think you'd better check him out. He doesn't have an ID card, and he gave me some crazy story of why he didn't have it. Well, the criminal police department sent 2 police inspectors to the hotel. They went into the hotel clerk, who took them up to the room. They knocked at the door. The escapee answered the door, and the police inspectors identified themselves and proceeded to question him. Well, the escapee immediately realized that he was not going to be able to talk his way out of this situation, not with 2 professional police officers. So he immediately gave a full confession that he had indeed escaped from Dachau concentration camp, and he had been hoping to escape into Switzerland, but obviously he failed. There were several hotel guests gathered up in the hall by this time watching this. This was big excitement in a quiet little town like Constance. The police inspectors now formally placed the man under arrest, took their prisoner down with them to the street, and ordered him to get into the sidecar of their motorcycle. They then drove away with the hotel guests still watching, and they drove him to an area of fields and gardens. They pointed to a little creek and said, "That's the border between Germany and Switzerland. Good luck to you." The man took 1 or 2 steps in the water, climbed out on the other side, and he was safe in Switzerland, thanks to 2 German police inspectors. Our family was lucky. We had relatives in the United States who sponsored us for immigration, and in May of 1939, when I was 14, we got permission to immigrate to the United States. It was just in time because only 3.5 months later, on September 1st, 1939, the German army attacked Poland, and that was the beginning of World War II. After the war started, it was almost impossible for anyone to get out of Europe anymore. It was also the beginning of the Holocaust, the period of time that coincided with the period of time of the war of World War II. And during the Holocaust, as you undoubtedly know, some 11 million civilians, not counting any soldiers who died in battle, and there were many more millions of those, some 11 million civilians were murdered by order of the Nazi government. Of those 11 million, some 6 million were killed for no other reason than the fact that they were Jewish. Of the 6 million Jews who were murdered, some 1.5 million were children 14 years old and younger, all the way down to newborn babies. They all were considered enemies of the German people. We got out just in time. Life in the United States was not very easy. My mother was the first one to find a job. These were the days of depression. She got jobs, actually a number of jobs, working as a cleaning woman for various families. different family every day of the week. After a few months, my father got a job as a porter in an old movie theater, cleaning, scrubbing, vacuuming, whatever needed to be done, from midnight till 8 o'clock every night. I went to school, finished high school, and then became a member of the United States Army. And while my father was a German soldier during World War I had now become an American soldier, was shipped overseas, and were fighting against my fatherland during World War II, shortly before the end of World War II. I have a couple of incidents I'd like to talk about during this time of my military activity. It was in Leipzig, Germany, a big city in East Germany. After the city fell to our troops and we arrived, our unit was taken to a camp outside of Leipzig. It was a small camp, Camp Erla. It was not a concentration camp. It was a labor camp. It only had 300 people in it. And these were people who were brought in from France, Belgium, and Poland, if I remember right, to work for the Germans in the fields, in the factories. This was standard procedure at that time. These people had to work all day, then they were taken back to the enclosure at night, and they had to sleep in the wooden barracks, which was surrounded by electrically charged barbed wire fence with a guard tower with machine guns overlooking the scene. When it became obvious that Leipzig was about to fall to the American troops, the guards rounded up all the slave workers, ordered them into the wooden building, nailed boards over the windows and doors of the building, poured kerosene over the top of the building, and set the building on fire with 300 people inside. Only about a dozen people figured out how to get out of the burning building. They jumped into the latrine pit, groped their way to the outside, and when they emerged from the latrine pit outside the building, the guards were waiting for them with their machine guns and cut them down. By the time we arrived, only one or two of the people were still alive, slightly alive. As for the rest, there was this big pile of ashes where some 290 people used to be, and there were bodies lying around outside this pile of ashes. We were really shocked. A number of the troops were seasoned veterans of the war, but even they were horribly shocked when they saw what had happened here. Why couldn't the guards simply have opened the gate when it was obvious that these people were about to be liberated? Open the gate and tell the people, thanks for your help, you can go home now. No, they couldn't do that. They couldn't allow these people to stay alive and to enjoy normal life again. There was another incident, unrelated, while we were in Leipzig. One of our tasks in Leipzig was to round up prisoners of war that had been former soldiers in the German army and to transport them back to a camp in the rear. The normal procedure was there would be a big truck. Prisoners would be loaded on the bed of the truck, and two GIs, two American soldiers, were assigned to drive the truck. One was a driver, and the other was a guard who would sit on top of the cab in front of the truck facing the rear with a rifle in his lap, watching the prisoners to make sure that they would not try to escape. On that day, I was given the job of being the guard. So I was sitting on top of the cab of the truck, facing the rear, staring down at the prisoners, while the other GI was driving the truck at the only speed that GIs drove in those days, and that was at top speed. He was racing the truck through the streets of Leipzig when all of a sudden several of the prisoners yelled at me, pointing to something up ahead, which was really behind me. I ducked down instinctively, and a low-hanging streetcar wire just barely passed over my head. Had I not ducked down, I'm sure that that wire would have taken my head off. It was a very strange feeling I had that day, having had my life saved by my enemies, German soldiers. My final anecdote is about a happening after the end of World War II. It was after VE Day. An intelligence unit requested the help of a man who could speak German. And I was loaned to this intelligence unit for one day. I was given a typhus shot vaccination and sent to a concentration camp, Flossenbürg, one of the major concentration camps in Bavaria, Germany. After I got there, I was given my assignment. I was told that I was to question two capos. A capo is himself a prisoner in the camp who is put in charge of other prisoners. Sometimes a capo, having himself been a prisoner, would have good feelings, sympathetic feelings towards the other prisoners, those who had to work under him. But more often than not, the capos were very anxious to show the SS guards that they could be just as cruel and just as efficient and just as brutal as the SS. And these two capos that I was to question had that kind of reputation. I had one of them brought in, asked him some simple questions to start with. Where was he born? What kind of work did he do? How long had he been at the camp? Then I got to the real questions. What kind of work did you do at the camp? I was put in charge of a group of prisoners who worked in the stone quarry. Stone quarry, what kind of work did they have to do? Well, they had to carry rocks from one place to another. They had to cut up rocks from either with a pick or with a hammer and chisel. They had to carry the pieces to other places. Hard work, right? Yes, very, very hard work. Did you ever kill any of the people that worked for you? Yes. How did you kill them? Generally with a rock or with a club. Why did you kill them? Always for a good reason. Generally, they didn't obey the rules. What kind of rules? usually they didn't work hard enough or they didn't keep clean. Do you feel that a person deserves to be killed if he doesn't keep clean? He looked at me rather strange. Of course, that was the rule. He had to keep clean. Didn't keep clean. How many people do you think you killed? 8, 10, maybe more. I don't know. Don't remember. He didn't have any feeling of guilt. He didn't have any remorse. He didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. Killing a person or killing a dozen persons was absolutely trivial as far as he was concerned. And when I had the other man brought in and asked him the same questions, I got the same answers. No feeling of remorse or guilt at all. Everything was perfectly logical and justified. So who were these Germans? Obviously, some of them were exceptionally good people. Many of them were exceptionally cruel people. Actually, the vast majority of Germans at that time were neither unusually good or unusually bad. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives, minding their own business, and allowing the murderers to do their business. And this is the danger. This was the danger at that time. This is the danger today. Albert Einstein said, if the world becomes too dangerous a place to live in, it's not because of the cruel men who do cruel things. It's because of the good people who sit and let it happen. When a man sees something being done wrong, something unjust, and he simply walks away from it and tries to ignore it and not get involved, he becomes the accomplice of the perpetrator. The bystander enables the perpetrator to commit his crimes. That is the most important lesson that I hope you will take home from this program. That when you see an injustice being done, you must get involved. You must do something. You must say something. What about the Germans today? Who are these Germans today? Are they different from the Germans of 60, 70 years ago? Yes, they are. I have met particularly a number of young Germans who have very strong feelings about what happened during their grandparents' generation, about the silence of their own grandparents during this time. And young Germans today are speaking up. They're speaking up about their feelings, and this is encouraging to me.